Welcome everybody, welcome everyone who's joining us in the Zoom, and welcome everyone who's able to see this on the live stream on our page. Welcome to episode 3 of Nature Talks. My name is Marguerite. I am a director of Fellowship of the Trees CIC. We're a small but growing grassroots organisation. Our mission statement is to connect communities by combining purposeful intention with action to restore land and culture, ensuring a thriving world for future generations. So we've developed this organisation together as a team so that we can create spaces, events, activities and projects which are all about reconnecting humanity back to the earth and restoring our relationship with the land. We've got many different projects on the go at the moment, including our beautiful community tree nurseries project, our Tree Guardians project, and we really love to do ceremonial tree planting events. You can find out more about the projects we're doing on our website, which is fellowshipofthetrees.org. But yes, in regards to ceremonial tree planting, which is probably the key idea that birthed the start of it as an organisation. So for one of our ceremonial tree planting events, we were hoping to do this big planting project on this land near Glastonbury. And it just so happened that this land, legend has it, before it was built upon, was once upon a time a druidic grove. So it felt really auspicious and beautiful and magical for us as an organisation to do a replanting of the grove of trees. And we were actually going to create a small woodland there, but with a focus on magical tree planting to restore that essence into the land. It was a friend of mine who's already following a druidic path that was really excited for me to get in touch with Adrian Rooke. He told me that this man is extremely amazing and incredible space holder, a druidic wisdom keeper, and was definitely the man for the job. So I got in touch with my friend, who was able to get in touch with Adrian. But unfortunately, that was just before the first lockdown came in, and which meant that our plans for this beautiful big event with mass gatherings were had to put on hold. And unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to have this meeting with Adrian. Along the way, I've also on my journey met so many different people from so many different walks of life, including a friend of mine who had gone through the 12 steps recovery program from addiction. And it was around the time where I was talking about creating this event. I spoke about hopefully being able to book Adrian to do the ceremony for one of our plantings. And my friend who had gone through the recovery spoke so highly of Adrian. I'm not going to name any names, but he said that he had many friends who had worked with Adrian, who was supporting them through the 12 Steps Addiction program, and said that he had had such a transformative influence on their lives and on their recovery. And indeed, in other healing paths and circles, I've met other people who've spoken so highly of Adrian's work. So it's so apparent that Adrian has just touched so many people's lives on his path, and is doing such important and profound work in all the different arenas that he's working in, both on the spiritual and the professional and the personal. And therefore, it's an incredible honour to have you here tonight, Adrian, welcoming you to Nature Talks.
Thank you, Margaret. That's a very flattering, wonderful introduction. Thank you for that.
Very necessary introduction, I feel. So I'm just going to begin with my questions, which I've got written out, just in case I have a brain thing and forget. So Adrian, first of all, could you please share with us about your personal journey and your life experiences that have led you up to the work that you're doing today?
Certainly. I mean, I don't want to get lost in it, Marguerite, but my own life experience, I'll just give a little brief overview. Some people will identify with this, I'm sure, and others will probably think it's completely bonkers, but I struggled as a small child. I never really felt like I'd incarnated on the right planet to the right family, and there was a sense of disconnect from somewhere deep inside of myself, and I struggled as a kid, and I had quite a dysfunctional family background. My father was an alcoholic in waiting. It went during my formative years. He eventually ended up going into the pub trade so that he could drink what he needed to drink and not have to worry about paying for it. He was a jovial chap, a good man really in many ways, but he drank himself to death around the age of 50, which was a great shame because he never got to see my children grow up, and he would have loved that. So there was a lot of tension. I had that strange feeling of watching the kids on the playground thinking, how do they do all this social interaction stuff? And, maybe they've been given some kind of map that I haven't been given. And, so, I was bullied quite a bit. But, one of the lovely things for me was just behind where we lived in a place called Headley Park in Bristol. And there was a woodland behind. It was called the Malago Woodland. And a small stream, and on the far side was a refuge tip actually, but that was like going a little bit too far. If you went to the tip, you were in trouble because it was you wandered off the beaten path. But whenever I was troubled, and this came to me from an early age, I found myself connecting with the woods on a deep level, and there was a particular hawthorn tree, and hawthorn trees are normally dense, but this one was quite odd, and it had almost like a little rabbit hole that I could crawl through, and it was hollow inside, and I made that my safe place. And I'm wearing a hawthorn necklace tonight, which I in memory of that really. And hawthorn is a tree of the heart, and because I've got heart problems, I take powdered hawthorn and various hawthorn potions and lotions every day, and it's kept me going. Without a shadow of a doubt, the hawthorn tree is looking after me. I would lie there, and it sounds bizarre, but I would lie there and listen. Put my ear to the earth, and I always felt like I could hear the goddess. I didn't understand it to be the goddess then, but it was like the heartbeat of Mother Earth, and I felt safe. I created this little shrine down there. I was quite a weird kid, really. I used to get all the dead birds and hedgehogs and things off the roads, and I always felt they deserved a decent send off. So I'd take them down and bury them in this place with lollipop stick crosses, and so that was my first introduction to a relationship with the natural world. And I also had a calling from an early age to, I think, I know Carl Jung said, and I'm not probably quoting it exactly, but he said inside of every human being there is a desire to connect with God, or a God of their understanding, or a goddess. And I had that as well. That was strong in me. And so I took myself, contrary to my family's atheistic stroke agnostic presentation, and I took myself off to church. Funnily enough, it was only the other night I spoke for the first time at a new AA meeting in that church, and it was like a coming back, because I had a mixed experience with this church. I loved it for a while, and as I developed and got to 11, 12 years of age, I started to question some of the teachings. I always felt that, if there was a divine creative power, it would be feminine. I never quite got the idea that it would be some bearded guy, watching over you, making sure you didn't do anything bad or perceived bad, and I just felt, that whole birthing process, birthing new universes, would be, that would be a feminine divinity that would be creating all of this. I brought that up one day at Bible studies, and it went down like a lead balloon. You know, it really did go down like a lead balloon. And there was lots of other things that started to pop up. And this guy was saying that pretty much everybody in the world, the Catholics, the Hindus, they were all going to hell, followed by, you know, anybody that worked in the pub trade, which was all of my family by then. Pretty much my granddad, my uncles. And I just had I had a little epiphany, and I thought, blimey, if it's only these people and that guy in particular that's going to heaven, you know, what a boring place that's going to be. You know, I'm off. And I left, and that was it. And I didn't go back to the Christian church for 20 years. And, you know, it was around that time that my career as a hedonistic party beast began, really. And you know, my father was running pubs by then. You know, he encouraged me to drink from an early age, and you know, I went through my whole teens doing the whole magic mushroom thing, and you know, pretty much tried most drugs along the way, and found that, you know, what was very fulfilling initially, because you know, there was no doubt whatsoever that alcohol and drugs did for me what I felt I couldn't do for myself. And it was like, I felt like it was a godlike experience when I drank and took drugs. It was like a connection experience. I soon realized that it was pretty much a demiurge experience, really, because, you know, there's an old saying, it says, first the man took a drink, then the drink took a drink, then the drink took the man. In my case, it was like 12-year-old scared, pretty dysfunctional kid took a drink, and the drink took the boy. And that pretty much ran my teenage years.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for sharing, Adrian. It sounds like yeah, it sounds like a deeply difficult time that you went through as a young person, with not having that role model of being able to connect and sort of soothe yourself, and having just seen that culture of drink drug taking and alcoholism around you. I mean, it would have only been natural that would have been where you would have sought your comfort. But it's just so beautiful to hear that just even from such a young age, that innate knowing about how you could connect was also with you, and just the practice of ritual, and and being guided to the hawthorn tree as an essence of the heart. You know, it was so beautiful to hear that was there with you during that time. So how did that proceed from your teenage years?
Well, it was quite how can I say, explosive, calamitous transformation. It was forced upon me by the fact that by the time I was 21, and it was a combination of my lifestyle, Marguerite, and also it was medical negligence. There's no doubt. I can't blame it all on my lifestyle, but that certainly didn't help. And I collapsed at Glastonbury Festival. I'd been feeling really poorly, but I collapsed at Glastonbury Festival, having taken quite a large amount of amphetamines to try and find some energy, because for a long time I was tired, and I kept going to what actually happened was I had my wisdom teeth removed at the dental hospital. They were impacted, and a student took my wisdom teeth out, and he made a right mess of it. And they had to get the professor down to sort it all out. What should have been 2 hours turned into 6.5 hours. And then unfortunately they sent me away, and they forgot to give me antibiotics, which was standard practice for that amount of intrusive surgery. And I developed something called endocarditis. And because I was 21, I kept going to my GP saying I feel poorly, I feel tired, you know, I'm sweating at night, I don't know what's going on. The bottom line was nobody would believe me, except for my mum, dear old mum. And, you know, I was wasting away really, and blacking out. There was all kinds of things going on. It was only my mum that saved my life, because she contacted the surgery and said, look, I'm getting my son to come up to see a doctor today, and if he's dying in front of my eyes, and if you don't do something, then I'll sue you for every penny you've got.
Wow.
And when I got there, the doctor was quite huffy. I didn't know my mum had this conversation with him, but he examined me, and within, I suppose, 30 seconds, the colour drained out of his face, and he said, "I want you to go to hospital." And I said, "When?" He said, "I'm getting an ambulance now." And I said, "No, you're not," because I had a little mini car that I drove up. It was a mini traveller with the wooden windows, so they're not about anymore. And it was sprayed with the moon and the sun and all kinds of stuff, and magic mushrooms on the back. My dad never knew that when he was driving it around. But so that was my little pride and joy. And I took that. I said, "I'm taking my car home." And my mum took me in. He spoke to my mum. She took me in. That was a Friday afternoon, and according to the specialist in the Bristol Royal Infirmary, I would have been dead by the Sunday. So, and there then began 3 months of multiple antibiotics to try and save my heart from this virus that was this infection that was attacking my heart. And I started to get iller and iller, and in the end they decided they had to operate. I remember it was a bizarre thing because I'm 21, and you kind of think, well, this shouldn't be happening to me. But at the time, there was two things. I was reading Lord of the Rings, and I was reading a book of First World War poets. Most of those didn't come back from the war, and so I overheard my dad out in the corridor demanding to know what the chances of my surviving this operation were. And the surgeon said, "Well, you don't really need to know, Mr. Rooke." And he said, "I do, tell me." He said, "Less than 20%.
Wow.
Because I was so weak. And that was I can remember being frozen to the bed thinking, "Oh my God, this is real. I could die here. This could be it, end game." And I had so many plans and dreams and hopes, and what came to me was the first of many experiences that mainstream science would probably challenge, or but I just closed my eyes, and there was it was like all the faces of these poets I'd been reading about just started to sweep across my horizon. And I didn't know these people, but they were young people just smiling at me, and I knew it. I got it, that they'd all died young. And I had this thought, this voice came in, and it said, "Is there any more validation if you live for 21 years, 5 years, or 80 years in the greater scheme of your soul journey?" And it was like, no, not really. And I just thought, okay, what will be, will be. What will be, will be. And so I went into the operation, and I had an incredible out-of-body experience during the surgery. And I watched the operation taking place from this consciousness in up above the operating theatre. I wasn't a body, but there was a light attaching this consciousness to my solar plexus. And I knew that if that separated, that was me over. But it was an incredible thing, Marguerite, because I don't think I'd really felt I'd done human very well up to that point. And the feeling was, I mean, you can't put it into words, but it was exquisite. It was peace. It was knowledge. It was, I'm sure that if I could have willed myself, I could have been anywhere in the universe in seconds. And so I didn't want to come back. I said, "Bugger that, let's get off," and it, it wasn't meant to be, because again, something from outside of me said, "It's not your time, Aid. You have to go back. You've got work to do. There's stuff for you to do." And then the next thing I knew, they were, trying to bring me back to life. and they succeeded. And the next thing I knew, I woke up and I was in intensive care. And that then started a whole new journey for me of trying to quantify and understand what had happened to me without any reference points or people around me to perhaps shine a spotlight on the questions that I had. So I kind of took myself off on a pilgrimage for a few years to all kinds of different traditions where I had amazing experiences, Buddhism, spiritualism, shamanism, and I met some lovely people, did some incredible things. But what I hadn't dealt with was that addictive part of my personality. And that was still there, just waiting, lying dormant, because I didn't drink for some period of time. I didn't touch drugs, and then one day I smoked a joint, and I knew when I smoked that joint, for me, and I'm only talking about my journey, what other people do is entirely up to them, but I knew when I smoked that joint I shouldn't be doing it, and it was a game changer. And I got caught up in that whole spiral of trying to deal with my feelings by pushing them down with lots of substances, and I lost those connections that I developed. They were good connections. Like I said, I met good people, but I always felt that it was like leaving a party and you picked up a coat that looks like yours. When you put it on, it was a couple of sizes too small. It wasn't really your coat. And I realized today, and that was because I was looking at traditions and faiths. Again, I know it works for thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, and that's really cool by me. But for me, I needed something that was rooted in the soils and and the conglomerates of this land, this island. And so that was there were several years of coming back to different quests and doing different things, and then there was drinking, drugs, chaos, and a combination of lots of things, some great times but also some quite challenging times.
Wow, powerful stuff, Adrian. Really powerful. Such a incredibly strong and challenging and intense beginning of your life and your journey, and to be faced with a near-death experience at age 21 and having those profound realizations is just, it's just so obvious to me why you were sent back, especially now knowing that the person that you are today and the work that you're doing. But yeah, really important things, messages coming through about about the use of substances in terms of trying to find that way to connect. And how that it can also sometimes cause disconnection for some who have that addictive tendency within them, and also I can really relate a lot to what you're saying about the trying on the coats of different traditions, and finding that you need something that's in your blood and in your homelands. I feel like I relate a lot to that. So I was wondering, could you explain to people who are not really familiar what is Druidry to you? I know that you're an OBOD Druid. That's the lineage you've worked with. So that's the order of Bards Ovates and Druids. But yeah, could you tell us about what is your path as a modern Druid, and what was the first steps to beginning on that path?
Well, I mean, again, I was still questing, and I had this memory. I believe that everything is interconnected now. I mean, I've got absolutely no doubt whatsoever, and I've been guided and prompted by spirit, by my ancestors, by forces that I can only begin to glimpse the power and the potency of these spirit beings, and the goddess. Really, I call her my goddess, because there was I can remember as a kid, and we had one of those old black and white tiny little TVs, watching the Druids at solstice going into Stonehenge, and they were the guys that wore the wimples, the white hats, and they were very stern, marching into Stonehenge, and it was like, oh, summer solstice and winter solstice, and that was the only times they did it, and that had never left me. throughout all my questing. And there was just something that kept saying, you need to find Druidry. And so I set out to do so. And it was really almost impossible. This is pre-internet, pre-mobile phones, you know, and you know, Druids were a little bit like, you know, I suppose the Masons or something. If you didn't know one, where were you going to find them? And so I put it out to the universe, and it was very bizarre because there used to be a charity in Bristol called the Druid Society, and I even went so far as to go and knock on their doors one day and said, you know, I'm looking for Druids. And this lady would be on the reception. She was really sweet. She said, oh, bless you, darling. We're actually a charitable society. We're like the Round Table. We do functions and raise money and stuff like that. You know, we used to be Druids 50 years ago, but we're not anymore. We're just a charity. Anyway, I put it out to the universe. If it was meant to be, it was meant to be. And I had at that time, I had a fruit shop. And that was another story. I bought that when I drank too much and woke up. I was going to India, actually. I had some redundancy money, and I was going to go off to India and find myself. And I woke up the next morning thinking something untoward's happened last night, but I can't quite remember what it was. And I bought my dad's friend's fruit shop. And, you know, so that was one for the history books. And so I was stuck in there for the next foreseeable years. But you know, I used to talk to, you know, my customers, and there were some really interesting people. And there was one lady that was really into astronomy and the stars. And you know, I'm dyslexic, so I've always found it really difficult to hold that amount of information. But she used to bring me in, you know, her predictions magazine when she'd finished with it. And I used to read a little bit and then get lost and then perhaps not read the rest. But, you know, it was sweet of her to do that. And this particular day, she brought me in a copy, and she'd gone, and I was walking to my office, and a customer came in. So I tossed the magazine onto the table, and when I came back out and walked into my office, it was a tiny little advert, it's about that big, and it said, "Are you interested in a revival of native British spirituality and Druidic practice? If so, contact PO Box 133 Lewis, East Sussex." So it must have been profound, because I can, you know, I can't even remember my own son's name some days, like, you know, but, you know, I can remember that, you know, so that was a turning point for me. And I knew something, there was a shift, massive. It was almost like, ooh, something's going on here. And I wrote to them, and they sent me through the first 4 lessons. It was actually a correspondence course. When I joined the order, there was something like 200, 250 people working this course. Now there's over 35,000 people worldwide that have are either working the course, have been through the course, and studied Druidry, or use that as a leverage to moving on into their own, you know, their own spiritual questing, searching, and I loved it. And the thing that I found really profound was that the first lesson, it said, if ever your guides, guardians, or your heart tells you that this path is not for you, then you are more than welcome to leave with our love and blessings. And I thought, that's nice. I like that. I like that. I like that freedom.
Yeah.
And so I stuck around, and I started to work through the lessons with a friend of mine. And, you know, we met every week, and we would work one lesson. We'd read one lesson out, and then we'd spend half, you know, we'd meet for 4 hours. I'd babysit my kids at the time. My ex-wife would go out, and you know, we'd spend 2 hours reading the lesson, planning how we were going to work that lesson into our lives, and then we'd spend a couple of hours reviewing what we'd got out of the previous week's lesson. And it was a lovely way of learning, because we did it together, and we had several profound experiences. You know, we went to a place, we were, you know, part of it was to seek out sacred sites, and I sought out a place called Tinkinswood, which is just outside of Cardiff. And it's a huge capstone, I think the biggest in the British Isles. and we went there, and there was a legend: if you spend a night under this capstone, you either become a poet or you go mad. And you know, we'd read an article by this guy who had actually gone mad. After, you know, he'd gone mad, lost his wife, lost his job, lost everything, and then became quite a famous artist in his own lifetime. So it was all meant to be for him. And you know, the capstone's made of, you know, multiple crystal formations. So it really is a healing place. And I had two visions when I was meditating on the stones. One was that I was just sat there quietly, and I heard this noise, and I opened my eyes and I thought, oh my God, you know, what is this? And I saw this legions of Roman soldiers marching along, and you know, the commander in the front and the standard bearer with a leopard skin thing on. You know, it's just mad. And then I closed my eyes, shook my head, and it was gone. And I found out afterwards, and I didn't know this before, that that was a main Roman road leading to Caerleon, which was a big Roman fort there. So something strange had occurred in that moment. And the other thing was, I was called into the woods. There was a little copse of blackthorn and hawthorn on the side. And I, you know, I thought, I'm not going to get in there. And then it was like this path just opened up before me. And I walked into the middle of this copse, and I had a wren landed in front of me, directly in front of me. And I was like, and it was literally about 18 inches. And it was like, I was looking into its eyes, and it was, and then I was aware from my peripheral vision that there was the wren either side of me. And I just thought, if I look behind me and there's another wren, that means I've got a wren in all four directions. And there was, of course. And so the wren became my power animal. And I found out afterwards, and I didn't know at the time, but I found out some weeks later that the wren was sacred to the Druids and was known as the king of the birds, because
that's beautiful.
Because it used intelligence rather than brute force. By flying on, hit your head under the wings of the eagle. And they had a competition to see who could fly the highest. Whoever flew the highest was the king of the birds. And the eagle had got as far as it could go, and then, you know, it was exhausted. I'm the king of the birds. He looked down on all the other birds that were, you know, he'd left behind, and then the wren jumped out from underneath its feathers, fluttered a couple of inches higher, and said, "No, I'm the king of the birds."
Ah, the wren, the king of the birds. That's so beautiful. I didn't know that. That's incredible. Thank you, Adrian.
You're welcome.
So I mean, having a look on the OBOD website, one thing that stood out that I really liked was a druid is the singer, the shaman, and the sage, meaning that the practice of druidry is the bard practice is meant to foster creativity, and then the ovate is it the ovate that is meant to be more of the healer, or is that?
Yeah, you're spot on.
And then the druid is the wisdom keeper
and teacher.
And teacher.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, what kind of things are you practicing at the moment with your druid path and with the OBODs?
Well, it was you know, I mean, I could bore you to death with a million different stories of magical events and occurrences that have occurred throughout my druidic journey. But, you know, it was like a friend of mine wrote a poem and said, you know, that part of his poem was, "This is the noblest of all homecomings." And it felt like that. It felt like I'd come home. And I found a grove of people that were working druidry, not initially. You know, initially I worked with my friend Stella, and then I put out again to the order in the universe for anybody else that was local. And I found that just the other side of Bristol, there were several people that were meeting to celebrate the Wheel of the Year, the 8 festivals, you know, the cross quarter points and fire festivals. So the solstices, the equinoxes, and the 4 fire festivals. And I contacted this lady, and they were just lovely and invited me over. And what I loved the most, we went down into the woods, and a guy had gone ahead of us, and he'd climbed a tree, And as we walked into this little grove that they used for their magical workings, this guy was playing the panpipes up a tree. And so we were like, just the magic was there as we wafted into this circle. And of course they were celebrating. They passed around a horn, you know, a drinking horn full of birch sap wine. And by this time I'd stopped drinking, taking drugs, and you know, I had a few years of clean time under my belt. So I went into a bit of a panic. Oh my God, what am I going to do now? I'm going to look really stupid, you know. And as the horn was passed around, I just knew. I tipped my bit onto the floor and said, I give it, you know, I give my drink to the earth because I don't drink alcohol, and passed it on round. And what was lovely was that the next time I went, the lady that was running it came up to me and she said, "You can drink out the horn. We've got aqua libra." And I thought that was really sweet. You know, that meant a lot to me, that they'd had a meeting and they didn't want me to be excluded in some way. So they'd all decided to forego their swig of mead in order that I would be included. And,
that's beautiful.
and, you know, and I really felt like I'd come home. And then, you know, from there, it just, the magic started to unfold in my life, you know, and there's always there's a price to pay sometimes for following a magical life. My partner, my wife of that time, wasn't drawn in the same way that I was. For her, it was more of an ordinary life, just a journey of simple things, really. And she didn't quite get it. I was drawn into this this different world of magical events and happenings, and that my attention had been drawn into this. And I tried to explain it was a calling from my soul, but we drifted apart. So that was sad. And I knew that I had to leave my business because that wasn't what my soul journey was about. So I took a big risk and just left my business, and, you know, took myself back to university in my 30s, you know, my mid-30s. But Druidry, you know, Druidry beckoned me onwards always to ever uncharted lands of potential and possibility, and, you know, and delight, really, working with being seen and unseen. And of course, you know, Druidry encourages us to work with trees, closely with the natural world. And I'd already had a relationship with trees. And so I loved that. I absolutely loved that. I can remember when, you know, in one of the early lessons, it called on us to go and make a wand, make your own magic wand. And something happened for me in that moment, that, because I, you know, you said it quite correctly and quite succinctly, that, you know, the bardic grade of Druidry calls on us to expand our understanding of the old legends and mysteries and the stories. The Druids were great storytellers. They were supposed to have been able to relay a minimum of 350 different stories of kings' lineages and other stories. And so that would have been part of their role. But also they were poets and entertainers and musicians and minstrels, and there was a whole array of things in the bardic section. And I kind of like that. You know, I found I found my voice now, and I run chanting groups and singing groups, and I can't sing, but then nobody can. You just chant and let go, and, you know, and it was lovely last weekend because I was at a Cocaine Anonymous weekend retreat, and they invited me along to do a singing night, because, you know, I do these things now within the various fellowships, and it's so joyful. These people, you know, people who've never done this kind of stuff before, and they rock up and they're really kind of nervous, And then I introduced them with some simple chants and simple songs. They're all nature based, so they're non-denominational, so it's not going to conflict with anybody's higher power beliefs or religious beliefs. And we just had this absolute mad 2 hours. And I'm drumming and I take a load of instruments and everybody was rocking away. And at the end, this guy said, well, I spent my life taking ecstasy and going to raves. He said, and I've never been to anything as mad as that. And so I kind of took that. That was a compliment. We had a lovely time.
Yeah, it's a big compliment.
So I got involved with trees, and then suddenly, because I didn't have that, what I felt I didn't have at that time, poetic language. I carved my wand, and I found a little niche for myself. And I suppose it's okay to just, I started to carve these magic wands.
Yeah.
And I've never been able to stop.
Oh, amazing.
So I carved them with all the different Ogham symbols. And then when I was working in the rehab, I started to carve some necklaces. And then, little necklaces from each individual tree of the 20 trees in the Ogham calendar tree language. So there's 20 trees, so say. I mean, some of it goes but way back historical. There's a monk in Ireland that wrote about the Ogham tree language in the 12th century. Some of it was added by Robert Graves when he wrote The White Goddess, and he was trying to create the language. But that's cool if it works. I don't care when it was written. It could be written yesterday. If it moves me and I think it's good, then I'm happy with that. And so I started to carve these little things, and then I started to give them to my clients. And if they succeeded in, well, there was one particular guy, it was really troublesome, and he caught me one night out by the pond. I was working the late shift, and I was carving a necklace. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm carving this." I said, "It's made out of alder, and it's the connotations behind this are it's a balancer of fire and water, and it's when you cut it, it looks like it bleeds, and it's water resistant, but it stands for being a spiritual warrior." He said, "Well, carve me one then." And I said, "Well, you're such a pain in the ass. I'll tell you what, if you get on with it and you complete treatment, I will carve you one." And he did. And so I carved him this necklace. And I said to him, when I gave it to him, when I was doing his discharge interview, and on the night, he would have had a big send off from his peers and got a medallion. And I said, "Look, keep it to yourself, because, this is just a little gift for you from me." So, of course, he's gone straight in and said, "Look at what AIDS give me. I got this necklace." So I had a caseload of 6. Oh, no. So they were all like the next day, "Well, we want one as well." So it became like a tradition.
Yeah.
And this is how it works.
Okay. I know, I've seen them before, because that was another thing I was going to say. Is a friend of mine that I was living with had this beautiful necklace. I was like, "Wow, what's that?" And she was like, "Oh, I got it from Adrian. It's I can't remember I can't remember which one it was." Yeah. But wow, that's just so beautiful that you were able to bridge those worlds, really, isn't it? Bridge the Ogham spirituality with actual 12 steps addictions therapy, and you were able to use that to give someone an incentive to finish their treatment. I mean, that's just really, really beautiful, Adrian.
Oh, thank you.
How do you because that's one thing that actually really drew me to you as well, looking on your website, is which is rooketherapy.co.uk, if anyone wants to see Adrian's work, is that you are a practicing therapist registered by the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapists, specialising in addiction. But then you're also really, really open about your spiritual path and your ceremonial and your ritual path and your craftsman path. I just sort of how did, I mean, did you ever have any resistance from any supervisors with that, or was it,
Of course, yeah, initially, you know, I mean, the idea behind therapy is that you don't put yourself, you know, you can keep yourself, your own stuff, your own, but, you know, I don't know. I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years now, and my experience has been that, you know, the more open you are about who you are, where you are, your own individual struggle, but also how accessible change and transformation is, you know, the more people I've been able to support and help to change. And I don't in a therapy session, I don't give people you know, here you are, go and join OBOD or anything like that. You know, I wouldn't go that far, but I am myself, and, you know, and little things that, you know, for example, you know, there is a disconnect, and you know, there's always been alcoholism, there's always been drug taking, so we can turn around and say, oh, it's a 21st century problem. Of course it's not. Ever since alcohol was invented, there have always been a percentage of people, for whatever reason, who have found moderation to be an anomaly. And you know, and you know, there's been all kinds of things throughout history that, you know, at one point in time they would stone or execute alcoholics because they didn't know what to do with them. And it's bizarre therapies like hydrotherapy, strapping somebody into a chair and firing jets of water at them. You know, I'm you know, you might have a clean alcoholic, but I'm not sure if you'd have a transformed alcoholic. So, you know, if you, and this is my belief, and again, you know, I stick with my own beliefs, and I always give people the opportunity, if this doesn't work for you, you know, then, you know, that's cool, that's free. You know, I could just give you myself, you know, and, you know, and then you move on and find somebody that you can work with. And, you know, but, you know, I believe that spiritual lack that I felt as a child was a precursor to my wanting to find a shortcut to manage my emotions. And alcohol and drugs did that beautifully for a while, until it turned on me. And it becomes like a shadow and a darkness. So it is like a, you know, all of the spiritual metaphors and quotes, they're all real in that. It's like coming out of the darkness and into the light. You know, having two lives in one, your addict life, you can have a resurrection, you can have your addict life, and then you can have a life free from addiction, where you can manifest fully your human potential. You know, I believe everybody's here, you know, for a reason. And you know, we all have, you know, opportunities to change along the way, and to learn and grow and develop and expand our heart chakra, expand our heart consciousness, so that, you know, addiction's a very selfish illness, because it becomes all about the addict. You know, it's all about what the addict can extract, and they're not thinking that at the time. You know, that's why it's cunning, baffling, and powerful. They're not thinking, oh, you know, I want to get all this emotional stuff, but, you know, there is like an emotional vampirism of what the family, loved ones, parents, children. So, you know, if I can encourage them to start doing simple things like, you know, go for a walk. You know, sometimes with clients, I take them for a walk and point out different aspects of the natural world, or, you know, ask them to go out and look at the stars at night and just imagine, you know, all these multiverses, and, you know, what are your problems in compared to this expanding, you know, let's let go, let's make some changes, you know. And also, you know, I tell people that they're made of stardust, you know, because we are. You know, I mean, the components, the minerals and the metals in our bodies come from exploding stars. You know, how awesome is that? You know, and then, you know, we've been gifted this opportunity to have this human experience, and then we set out to destroy it in whatever way we can, and to be the smallest person we can be, rather than, you know, the most open and expansive person we can be. And there's no greater joy for me in my life than seeing somebody with a busted life suddenly picking up the threads of hope and potential and then transforming their lives. And, you know, it's lovely. My life's been very rich. It hasn't been without its problems, but it's been very rich. And, you know, I quite often get people contacting me that, you know, I worked with 10, 15 years ago, and just sending me like a, you know, a presaged life history of where they are today and their children and their jobs and, you know, what they're doing in the world and how they're really living their lives. And, you know, it just warms my soul and brings me to tears sometimes, because, you know, these were people that were dying. You know, these were people that were dead, you know, dead people walking, really. And there they are fulfilling their true destiny. So you know, it's a blessing. You know, I never tire of that.
Yeah.
Never tire of that.
Yeah, indeed. Sometimes the darkness and the dark times we find ourselves in is just the soil that we are within, as a seed being planted for our transformation and our change. And, you know, and sometimes, I mean, I would say from my own personal experience, I mean, I've been following you the whole way, Adrian, with you the whole way, that I also had the I had early life experience of addiction that went on to my 20s, and yeah, it ended up not quite a near death experience, but yeah, certainly that kind of end of the road, kind of utter nowhere else to go other than within, and then without, and to change. And that's what sort of started my whole journey with healing work, and also with wanting to be compelled to do this work with the fellowship as well. So it's really touching me, everything that you're saying, so thank you so much. And yeah, I just you know, one of the reasons that we wanted to do these Nature Talk series is because at the moment we're in extremely strong times in humanity and existence. You know, I mean, it's been a difficult few years for everyone as a collective. I mean, obviously having 2 years, is it 2 years now we've had a lockdown experience with,
pretty much.
Yeah, it's 2020, yeah, wasn't it? So we're coming into 2020 when we went into our first lockdown, and you know, so many people have experienced COVID, so many people have experienced loss, so many people have lost their businesses and their lives, so many others have probably turned to addiction as well, and there's been a rise in mental health issues. And then coupled with that, you know, alongside that, there's also IPCC reports just really alerting humanity and governments that actually, you know, we're getting past the tipping point in terms of what's happening to the climate, and what the consequences will be in terms of natural disasters, famine, and our natural world. So it's extremely strong times, and you know, that is one reason we wanted to get these Nature Talks going, is just because we wanted to provide a platform for people to who have had these amazing life experiences and these amazing connections with nature. So no pressure, Adrian, with that. I mean, can you share anything? I mean, how have you felt during these times, and what's helped you, and what would you say to others?
Yeah, it was a challenging time, of course, and it has been hugely challenging for a lot of people, but life works, you know, the goddess works in mysterious ways. I had my last open heart surgery 6 years ago, and it didn't go very well. The valve that they initially put into my heart, they had to replace, and I've got a lot of scar tissue around my heart, and my left ventricle's collapsed completely, so I've only got about 40% of my heart working. I've got a pacemaker and a defibrillator in there, so you know, I'm like the mechanical man, really. And I was still, you know, I was still in an awful position at that time. And you know, I'm very blessed. There's a lady that came into my life, and you know, she's been a absolute rock, really, and she's a medical herbalist called Jo Dunbar, and she's written several books about herbs and so on. And she just started firing all the hawthorn into me, you know, and lots of other herbs as well. And you know, I do seriously believe that my physician didn't think I was going to make it, because it really was, you know, when I was rocking up for these checkups every couple of months, he just used to go, "I don't know what you're doing, Aid, but just keep it up." And I tried to tell him I was taking lots of herbs and natural remedies, and of course that tends to go over their head a little bit. They're very mechanical, and you know, but you know, he didn't dismiss it, but you know, he wasn't hugely interested. And when lockdown came, my family were very concerned, you know, about this, the information that was being put out by the media and the government about the severity of the chances of death. And of course, I was right up on the Richter scale of people that probably wouldn't have come through it. So they all got together, my family got together and decided to banish me to Joe's place. And Joe lives in a little village in Petersfield, just outside of Petersfield in Hampshire, where she's got an apothecary in her back garden, beautiful apothecary. And so I was blessed in a way, because it gave me time out, which I wouldn't have took. I had a lady contact me who I had some connections with some years ago, and she's now running a mental health charity. And she said, "Aid, would you take on some clients, as many as you want? These are all men that have attempted suicide in the last couple of months, and it'll be, of course, over Zoom and Skype." And so off I went to Hampshire with a caseload of people that I could still continue to work with, and that was wonderful. So it kept me, it kept my professional self moving along. And I voluntarily sponsor some men as well, and they kept in touch with me on a daily, weekly basis. And I spent most of lockdown wandering the hills of Hampshire, harvesting ribwort and you know, St. John's wort and various other, and making these wonderful potions and lotions that get sent out all over the world. So it was a really, and I built a pond.
Oh, nice.
You know, so I, you know, it was like, it really gave me an opportunity to spend more time in nature and to connect it with the natural world and herbalism and other things in a way that I wouldn't, you know, I would have been too busy in my everyday life to have taken that time out. So in a way, that was a blessing. So and of course, you know, coming back from that, I did a Radio Bristol interview, and you know, my research has shown that the whole of society has got an underlying kind of post-traumatic stress thingy going on, like, you know, where everybody's a bit weirded out, but they don't quite know why, and they're not sleeping well, and they don't know what to do, and you know, and the future seems to be, you know, quite unpredictable, and it's lockdown ends, lockdown doesn't end, you might get locked down again in the autumn, you know, all this, you know, this almost sticking carrot stuff that's coming from the government, the mentality, you know, the mentality of it all, and people are troubled. And you know, what I've tried to do in relation to my Druidry is encourage people to go out to whatever wild places they can access. And for some people that might be a park, or it might even just be their back garden, and do something, you know, do something. Yeah. You know, and I was very blessed, you know, that a friend of mine, even during lockdown, had embarked on a tree planting, you know, exercise on the slopes of Dundry Hill. And so you know, as long as we all socially distanced, bought our own spades, bought our own cups of tea and everything else, you know, there'd be an allocated amount of trees there for us, and we could go up on the hills and plant them. So, you know, that felt very useful for me as well. You know, over the years, I've been, not as much as I'd like to, but I've been involved in several opportunities to go out and join in with other kindred spirits and plant lots of trees. And that's such a fulfilling thing to do. You know, we at one point in time, we wandered along a riverbank on the borders of Oxford and the Swindon area. So that would be what, Wiltshire, I suppose. And we planted hundreds and hundreds of alders, oaks, and willows, and that was some years ago. And they're doing really well now. And at a ham fasting I did, you know, 15 years ago, and I did another ham fasting at the same place last year, and that was just awesome, because we planted a tiny little oak to celebrate the ham fasting 15 years ago. 15 years later, it's like 15 feet tall, you know, and it's just lovely.
Is the marriage still okay?
Marriage is really, really going okay. And you know what was really nice? The people who I was ham fasting this time round, I bought part of the farm that had belonged to their father, the lady's father, and they bought and they've planted an organic vineyard all the way around the side of the hill. 100% biodynamic organic. And all the wines are named after the different festivals of the year. And so that's really beautiful. But the first two people to jump the broomstick after the ham fasting were the people that I'd ham fasted 15 years earlier.
Wow.
You know, it's just magical, you know.
Like life's all about seasons and cycles.
Without a doubt, without a doubt.
But yeah, definitely thank you for sharing that, Adrian, because I'm really hearing that, you know, about your personal journey through lockdown, whilst also having to, you know, manage your own health condition. That's, you know, the ability to be able to be of service, you know, is just so fulfilling, isn't it? You know, to be able to continue offering support to others. You know, I can see that has really like provided you as well life force and energy and drive during these times, and also the connecting with nature and being and going out wherever it's possible, you know, even if you're living in a really urbanized area, a local park, any green space that you can get to, you know. It's like in the work I think it's actually a meme on Facebook saying in the woods there's no Wi-Fi, but you'll get a better connection. I love that. I've shared that loads of times.
Can I just say something, Margaret?
Yeah.
You know, at the end of my drinking and drug taking, and it was really frustrating because, you know, I knew for years that, you know, what the path that I was following was impeding my soul growth, and that, you know, I would never really fully manifest. I knew that, and yet the trickiness, and I got to that place where I cried out one day to the goddess. And I said, you know, either let me not drink and do this shit anymore, or just let me die now, because, you know, I can't live this half life anymore. And what was beautiful in that for me was that I stopped drinking, but I did make a pact with the goddess at that time. If you support me in this, all I ever want to do is be useful. You know, let me be useful. And you know, and I like to think I have been.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it, Adrian. Definitely sounds like it. So yeah, just I think we're moving into the time where we're gonna invite others to ask you questions if they feel like it. No obligation to the people in the Zoom room. If you don't feel like it, it would be really great if you could. But yeah, I just wanted to, I'm just curious, Adrian, with all this beautiful wisdom and experiences that we've shared, that like how would you envision the world needs to change right now? You know, what would paradise on earth look like to you? How can we as humanity move forward? That's 3 questions in one. Same sort of message.
Well, that's a huge question, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I wish I had the answers to that, to be honest.
Mm.
We need a simpler way of living, that's for sure. And you know, I mean, it's common sense that we can't keep taking from the earth and not giving back. There, you know, I think it's a truthism that there's too many human beings and not enough resources, and that, you know, the capitalist model hasn't worked in any shape, size, or form. You know, there's no understanding or thoughtfulness or compassion or, you know, or understanding of the earth as a living, breathing, divine being. It's like, take what we want for our own personal pleasures in the here and now and bugger the rest. Somebody else can sort it out somewhere down the line. And that makes me sad. But I do, you know, what makes me feel, you know, stronger in myself is that, you know, the natural world is bigger than us. Mother Earth's bigger than us. You know, in some ways we're an irrelevance, you know, and we can play a part in expanding the consciousness of the goddess and the divine, or we can just be taken out of the equation. And you know, I do believe that. And you know, there's a poem. I'll just read this. It's lovely. It's written by a friend of mine called Liv Torque, and it's about the oak. And the oak is the king of the trees as far as the Druids are concerned, because that's where they think maybe the name Druid comes from, which is the Celtic name Dur, and Dur, Druid, man of oak. And this just mighty is the oak, the prince of light, lord of perfect knowledge, king of the Celtic land. Once an acorn with the potential of the world, small enough to hide inside your hand. Noble is the oak, the sacred Druid tree, guardian of the north, a living channel of divinity, offering shelter and protection for the warrior who has fallen. For even in silence, I, the oak, will hear your call. Take my strength, I will catch you. You will live through this, you will endure. And you know, I think, you know, we have to go back to nature and take our lessons from the natural world. And you know, it's not going to be an easy process, but you know, a bit like turning around one of those cruise liners. If we make the decision to change now, then maybe we can change in time and start to use the technological intelligence that we have to start to, you know, scoop all this rubbish out of the seas and you know, to make a concerted effort to recycle everything, dig up all the tips and recycle the lot. You know, we could do it, but you know, there's got to be the willingness there. And I love that, you know, Extinction Rebellion are doing their thing, and there's an awakening throughout the land of people. And I love, you know, also the Indigo children story. You know, I took my 12-year-old grandson to Glastonbury yesterday, and he was born with cerebral palsy, and we never thought he'd walk. We had to raise 60,000 for him to walk, and you know, it was a really big deal. And he had this operation, which, you know, and he does walk, and sometimes he falls over and he gets up and he just gets on with it. But he came down, and we were sat in the goddess temple, you know, praying for the earth and for his dad, because his dad was in a car crash last week, my son, and it was like just seeing this little 12-year-old there praying to the goddess. And I thought, you know, these are the people, they're not going to put up with this bullshit. You know, these are the people that are coming through. They'll be the ones that create a new narrative and a new story. You know, these are going to be the movers and shakers. And you know, I just pray that it's so.
Yeah, I'm with you in that prayer, Adrian. Definitely with you in that prayer. So we've discussed in this talk like some really important themes, and I just wanted to, in case anybody's watching who might have experienced say any addiction in their lives or addiction in their families, I just wanted to know if you have any reference point to share, Adrian, or what would you usually say to someone if they're literally on the first steps of realization that they want to get help with their addiction? Where's the first place to start?
Well, for me, I mean, years ago, I mean, I had the good years, to be honest, Marguerite. You know, I worked in the rehab world when we had a focused program to deal with drugs and alcohol addiction. They had most cities across the land had their DAT teams, drug and alcohol treatment teams, and there was funding. There was an allocated amount of money funded to send people into treatment. And people needed that. They needed that 6 weeks in a primary or 8 weeks in a primary treatment environment, removed from temptation, removed from their so-called using friends, so that they could start to, you know, free their neural pathways long enough that they could start to see the potential in their own lives. And then maybe they'd go on to a dry house or something else for a while. There was a whole package in place. Now, unfortunately, most of that has to be financed privately.
Yeah.
It's still there. A friend of mine's currently in the process of developing an online, program similar to what you get in a rehab, but obviously it's going to be at home and online because there's nothing out there. But basically, I would recommend anybody who's got any problems to get in touch with the fellowships. Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous. You know, they'll find plenty of people there that want to help and support them moving their lives forward. And for family members who have got addicts in their lives and they don't know where else to turn, there's Families Anonymous, which is for family members of addicts, and there's also Al-Anon, which is for people that have got drinkers in their lives. So, and they're support groups that allow people the opportunity to be held and loved and not to feel different. You know, this is only happening to me. The shame, the guilt, you know, could I have done something different?
Yeah.
So yeah, and there are private therapists out there that are very good as well. And most towns still have a point of call where, you know, you can go to, like the Swan Project in Bristol, and you can get counselling and therapy. But you know, there's waiting lists, and you know, so I would say, you know, if you've got a problem, contact one of the fellowships.
Thanks, Adrian. Thank you. I hope that's helpful for anyone who's watching who might have been touched by any of these issues that we've discussed. So we're going to move into the question and answers shortly, but first of all, I saw this video on Adrian's YouTube channel, which is it just Adrian Rooke YouTube for people who want to check you out on YouTube, because you've got a whole list of things on your channel, including your work with the Ogham and your wands and your talismans as well. What's your YouTube channel name?
Do you know? I don't know.
Okay.
I've never gone on there.
Oh, right. Okay. All right. Well, you can. I mean, to be honest, guys, I just found Adrian Rooke on YouTube by Googling Adrian Rooke in the search bar, so you can find him. I wanted to bring forth this beautiful bardic poem that Adrian has shared about Stanton Drew, one of our ancient ancestral stone circles in the southwest of England.
Just a couple of miles outside of Bristol.
Yeah. So in case anyone wanted to feel inspired to check it out themselves. So Taliesin, would you mind sharing that beautiful video, please?
Shadows descend across this ancient timeless place of standing stone, stirring deep, hidden memories of a time when old and now forgotten gods trod these ancient paths. The darkness races across the land like hares before a storm, The noble hawk unceremoniously flees to its high nest, heart frozen in confused terror. The stones loom more strange in this twilight world between worlds, whispering of ritual and death, through eon upon eon now passed into space dust. The soft southeasterly wind caresses my inner ear with the mystical, magical chanting of the old priests and guardians of this sacred place. Ariamrod begins the retreat to her coal-black diamond-studded throne. This was her moment, frozen in time, like dewdrops in midwinter, fleeting, powerful, but always destined for brief magnificence. Lou, tentatively, guiltily, reclaims over this land called Albion. In the hedgerows, the sap begins to rise, the buds begin to burst forth, the primrose basks in bejeweled splendour. Spring has returned. Blessed be.
Wow. Said wow so much in this talk, but no, seriously, goosebumps, Adrian. That's so magical. When did you write that poem?
I wrote that, I think that was about 4 or 5 years ago. There was a solar eclipse. You know, it was it was an eclipse. It was an eclipse on spring equinox, and I can't remember exactly what year it is now. My brain doesn't hold all that kind of information. But you know, I went out to Stanton Drew, and it was eerie because it wasn't a full eclipse, but it was a partial eclipse. But you know, from 1 minute all the rooks were in the air, in the sky, and everything was happening, and then there was silence. And in that silence, you know, I could hear the ancestors around me just breathing. You know, it was just unbelievable. It was a magical moment. So
thank you so much for sharing. Thank you. So beautiful people of the Zoom room, I call upon thee to ask any questions to Adrian now that you have the chance, if you would like to. We do have one already. It's I'm not sure who's written this, but it says, I think it must have been in relation to when we were talking about the way that we've been treating the earth. And it says, would you say we are still overpopulated if our lives were simplified?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not. I wouldn't lay claim to being an expert in how we move forward from this. But you know, I think statistically one has to. And you know, there's a mode of consensus that says all these souls are incarnating for a purpose. You know, and I partially, you know, there's a part of me that really believes that. But you know, there's also a part of me that says that, you know, I don't know. I mean, there has to be a stop point where we don't keep producing what we're doing, and I don't know how the next step. I've got a lot of friends of mine that live very simply. A lot of really close friends of mine that are managing to live in the woods in yurts, and they have sustainable lives, and people that live off grid, and you know, and they're doing their thing. I can't see that 87 million people, or however many people there is in the UK, could all suddenly start to live off grid and support themselves. But you know, we can, you know, what we can do is look at, you know, obviously packaging and, you know, processing, and you know, how we live our lives, and encouraging, giving people grants to start to grow their own food, and making, you know, I mean, there's been 50% of the allotments lost in this country in recent times, and they've been built over. So we need to give hundreds and thousands of acres of allotments to people so they can grow their own fruit and veg, and share and do things and plant more trees. And you know, we need to be leaders in this, and then hopefully other countries will follow. But you know, if I had all the, leading a simpler life would be a start, you know. And you know, we live in a want society, and of course, you know, the advertising agencies and so on, that there's an investment in connecting to our desire for not having enough. So, you know, this car is not enough, or, you know, your life's going to be complete if you have a 120-inch television, or, you know, so and this throwaway mentality, you know, that can change. Of course it can. But how quickly it changes will decide what kind of future we have as a species. I think if you know, this is my own beliefs. I believe that we're connected to consciousness. Consciousness isn't just human. Consciousness belongs to all living creatures on this planet. And that, you know, if we did come to a sticky end, our consciousness would still continue, the universe would still continue, and in some form we would still continue. So, you know, that's what keeps me hopeful.
Yes, I think it's probably especially that you had that death experience where you were looking over the operating table, and you had that feeling, and you witnessed that precipice of life and death and the waiting room, and you felt infinite, you know. So it's in that state of consciousness you realize that life will go on.
I wouldn't have, you know, that experience initially, you know, I was full of a 21-year-old's angst of why is this happening to me? And people have asked me now, if I were to be able to have a different experience and not to have gone through that, would I have a different experience? And I have to say no, because that did change my life. And, you know, and I've also met lots of other people that have had that death, close brush with death, and they feel the same. And of course, not everybody gets that, you know, and neither should they, because it is harrowing at the same time as it's enlightening. Yeah.
So there's two other comments. They're not questions. Jane has shared that she had an alcoholic father and got a great deal of help from Al-Anon for friends and families of alcoholics. And she said, that was it for me, the realization that others felt the same as I did. I'd felt so alone. So thank you so much for sharing that, Jane, with us. Yeah, I hope others that are watching might also feel inspired to reach out to that fellowship if they also feel the same way, if they've got a family member. And Roger has said, no questions, but I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Roger.
So we've just got a few minutes left, and there doesn't seem to be any more questions. So I was thinking about what we would do to fill in the time. And I know I said I wouldn't spring anything on you, Adrian, which is why we had a little chat beforehand. But I would be really deeply honoured if you would mind sharing any meditation or any prayer or blessing just to finish and close the space from your lineage. If you don't feel comfortable to do that, that's also fine, and I can do it. But
okay, no, I'm all right with that. I'd like to share a prayer. And it's not a Druidic prayer, it's a Native American Indian prayer, but it's something that touched me years ago. And then I'll finish with a little song, if that's all right.
Yeah.
You know, okay. So this was written by a guy called Chief Yellowlark, and I think it sums up both addiction and how I want to live what's left of my life. And it says this: "O great spirit, whose voice I hear in the winds, life to all the world, hear me. I come before you, one of your many children. I am small and I am weak. I need your strength and wisdom. Let me walk in beauty and make my eyes ever behold the red and the purple sunset. Make my hands respect the things you have made, and my ears sharp to hear your voice. Make me wise that I may know the things you have taught my people, the lessons you have hidden in every leaf and in every rock. I seek strength, not to be superior to my brothers, but to be able to fight my greatest enemy, myself. Make me ever ready to come to you with clean hands and straight eyes, so when life fades as a fading sunset, my spirit may come to you without shame.
Thank you.
Humble yourself in the arms of the wild. You gotta lay down low and humble yourself in the arms of the wild. You gotta ask her what she knows, and we will lift each other up. Higher and higher, we will lift each other up. Humble yourself in the arms of the wild. You gotta lay down low and humble yourself in the arms of the wild. You gotta ask her what she knows, and we will lift each other up. Higher and higher, we will lift each other up.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I don't know what that noise was, but it was joy. Thank you so much, Adrian. That is so beautiful. Yeah, thank you. Is that your song?
No. I do something called sacred chanting, and it comes from the Hindu kirtans. I used to go to a lot of kirtans, and lots of singing to Ganesh, and lots of Shiva and lots of Indian gods, which was lovely, beautiful. I still go from time to time, but again, it wasn't rooted in these lands. So there was a whole bunch of people got together and collected all of our pagan songs, and so I do chanting evenings at the Goddess Temple. And of course, they were banned during COVID. The Goddess Temple in Bristol, in Warmley in Bristol, and so we're actually back there on the 21st for a small autumn equinox ceremony and some singing and chanting. So if anybody's interested, you need to email the Goddess Temple in Bristol and book a place, because there's only so many people allowed to come. I think they charge a £5 or something like that, but it's a wonderful evening, and we sing our souls to honor the goddess.
Wow. I know I certainly wouldn't mind sharing an equinox with you, Adrian. It's been an absolute joy and pleasure and an honor to host you. I've so enjoyed the conversation. You've been so great because you answered all the questions without me needing to ask you. But you are a font of knowledge and wisdom, and a true druid. I can see with everything that you share and how much service you've given to the planet. And I'm really glad that I got to finally meet you, even if it was in the cyberspace and not planting trees. Maybe in the future, hey.
Hopefully, yes. That would be lovely.
So yeah, thank you so much to everyone that's tuned in to Nature Talks. Please do check out Adrian's website, rooketherapy.co.uk, Adrian's YouTube. Please also check out our website, fellowshipofthetrees.org. Keep tuned, there'll be more Nature Talks with more pioneers of nature and spiritual leaders and people who are representing the voice of Mother Earth coming forward to speak. If you also feel called to, we're trying to collect donations at the moment. We've got a few projects that are ongoing, but we're also trying to work towards doing quite a large scale tree planting this season and bringing people together to sing songs around the sacred fire and honor the trees that are planted. So if you do feel called, please do donate to us. We'll really appreciate it. And thank you so much to everyone. Many blessings on your lives. Please don't forget to go outside and connect to nature. Don't forget the herbs for your health. Don't forget your brothers and sisters. Do connect in whatever way you can to help you get through these times. Loads of love and blessings, and thank you so much.